Welcome to the Good Food CFO podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Delavan. And as always, I'm joined by our producer, Chelsea Steer.
Hey, Sarah. It is time for a Baba Yacht member highlight.
Love it.
The Good Food CFO podcast is a member-supported podcast. And if you are a regular listener, you know that we have some really big goals here. And your membership is a direct investment in not only helping us to achieve those goals, but also to help us continue to bring you weekly ad-free episodes. And one of the benefits that members get in return for their support is a highlight of their brand right here on the podcast. So today, we want to thank monthly member Sharon Jorgensen of Oveteen. Oveteen is food packaging that extends the life and quality of food while preserving natural resources and reducing waste. Oveteen is a film that was created by 3 food science universities, and they were looking to mimic the microclimate of an egg. They considered that to be like the best way to preserve food. And so that's what this packaging does. It creates the best microclimate for your food. Oveteen is breathable, allowing air to come in and out, and it has a high barrier from bacteria that delays mold and proliferation. And food is preserved 10 times longer by Oveteen. No trees or water are used in the manufacturing, and Oveteen is washable, reusable, and 100% recyclable. You can use Oveteen at home, but there are also practical uses for it, not only in retail, but other areas of your food business where preserving the lifespan of your ingredients matters. So if you want to learn more about Oveteen, you can visit their website at www.oveteen.com, and we're going to include that link down in our show notes. Sharon is one of our original Baba Yacht members, and she always shows up for this community. She asks great questions and hypes up her fellow founders. So Sharon, thank you for your membership.
Yes, Sharon, thank you. And speaking of community, it is time for another book club announcement. And this one is a community recommendation, which is super fun. The book is called Clear Thinking: Turning Ordinary Moments into Extraordinary Results by Shane Parrish. Shane is also the founder of Farnham Street. He's the host of the Knowledge Project podcast, and he's the author of a pretty popular newsletter called Brain Food. So as I mentioned, this is a community recommendation. I have not read this book. So this is the first time that that's happening, and I'm very excited about it. And what I was told by our community member was that while it seems obvious once you read this book, learning how to carve out time and work through a process to truly understand a problem and then make a decision has been super helpful. So inside the book, we are told that we're going to, among other things, find out how to identify and reprogram the enemies of clear thinking, think independently, and create advantageous divergence, avoid self-destructive behaviors that keep us from moving forward, and shift our perspective to remove blind spots and see the situation clearly. I am going to be grabbing my copy today, and you can grab yours at thegoodfoodcfo.com by clicking on Book Club in the main menu.
Yeah, and then don't forget to join us for the actual book club discussion on Wednesday, June 19th at 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And remember, you don't need to be a member to join this event. It is open to everyone in our community, and you can learn more, again, by visiting the website and clicking on Book Club.
All right. Okay, should we get into the main episode of today? So I was joined in conversation recently by Ali Cox. And just to fill you in on who Ali is, she's a 5th-generation farmer, agriculture and food ingredient marketing visionary, and the founder of Noble West, which is actually an award-winning marketing consultancy that specializes in the entire agricultural ecosystem. So from fresh produce to nuts to dairy to agTech, Noble West is helping brands grow and succeed. And Ali and I got together to discuss how to maximize the return on investment in online marketing. Now, you know, Chelsea, that we get pitched a lot here on the podcast. Lots of people want to talk about branding and marketing. It's obviously a valuable and important and popular topic. But when Ali approached us, she had a different sort of angle that she wanted to take in the conversation. And that was really diving into, like I said, how do you maximize the ROI? And not only that, she has some really, I think, blunt and honest opinions and advice for a lot of the founders that are listening.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. I loved how, sort of as you mentioned, like narrowed in you guys got on, we're not just talking about marketing, we're talking about how do you market efficiently and effectively, right? How do you build the partnerships that are going to help take your brand where you want to go? How are you going to utilize the tools that are out there now in terms of advertising in a way that, as you already mentioned, you're maximizing that ROI and not kind of blowing through your ad budget?
Yeah. And in the CFO seat, I get to interact with, learn about marketing strategies and ad campaigns that some of my clients are utilizing. And I have to say, like, there are some bright spots in that work and there are some dark spots in that work. And Ali and I talk about that as well, like what your expectations should be when working with an agency, when onboarding or considering onboarding with an agency, that I thought was just super informative and helpful for a lot of the founders, listening, and certainly would have been helpful to some situations I was a part of in the past, with Food Biz founders. And she also shared some things with me that were true aha moments. I'm not going to do any spoilers here, but again, kind of like with the book club recommendation, like it seems obvious, but not everyone is doing it. And when you hear Ali talk about some of the things she talks about in the show today, I think people are going to go, oh, okay, I feel like I've got a better handle on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, should we get to the episode, Sarah?
I think we should. Let's do it.
As a good food founder, do you ever feel like your work is done in a silo? Is it difficult to feel confident in your business and financial decisions because you don't have a sounding board? Well, in our weekly CFO office hours, you'll not only get the chance to work shoulder to shoulder with the Good Food CFO herself, Sarah Delavan, but also with a small group of your peers. Together, you can support each other through the work of building a business on your own terms. Passes are available now on our website. Just visit thegoodfoodcfo.com and click on services. And now back to the show.
Hi, Ali. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so excited to chat with you today. We had sort of a pre-podcast conversation, not sort of, we did. And I was expressing to you some of my frustration with the return on investment that the brands I work with and coach are getting on, marketing and online ads and things of that nature. And you had some just what I thought were really interesting insights and information. And I was like, we must have you on the show. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about that. It's not as scary as I think some people think. And especially, obviously, typically I'm not talking to the finance person about how to spend their advertising. Normally I'm justifying it on the back end, but I'm happy to be having this conversation on the upfront. And really honestly commend you for having it. Typically finance folks are like, you know what? No. So
yeah, I mean, I like to have a way to, like, the ROI, right? Like if we're investing in something, I like to have an expectation, not that the results have to be like that the forecasted results have to be absolute, right? And they have to hit those numbers, but knowing what are we measuring? Why are we measuring that? And what is the outcome that we are striving for is so helpful for a financial person, because then we can go, okay, we know how to measure this. Yeah. We know if we keep investing in this or not, But before we dive too deep into that, I want to talk a little bit about your background. So you're the CEO of Noble West, and you work with not the typical CPG brands that we kind of talk about here on the podcast. Will you share with our listeners the specific kind of sector of the industry that you work with?
For sure. I'm happy to talk about our awesome clients and what we do. But I do want to go back to something you just said.
Sure.
Which was, forecasting absolute returns. Here's the thing, just like the stock market, if there was an absolute return, we all would do it, right? That's why there's strategy to it. That's why there's experts. That's why we study it. And we share that with our clients all the time. They're like, okay, well, if I spend 100 grand, when am I going to get 300 grand out of it? I'm like, it's not that kind of predictability is not there, but that's why you have strategies, and that's why you continue to like check and whatnot. But what is absolute are your KPIs. And what is absolute is your hopeful trust in the strategy and your willingness to try it. And that's where you can really put some genius to good work. And that's where having a partner who really understands kind of the ebbs and flows, understands and also invests in like the education of reading the Google notes, reading all the developer notes across all the different platforms, understanding what different options are out there are really, really important. And what really kills me is when I see small businesses just throwing away money, with good intention and just dabbling, because that dabbling is never going to get you anywhere. And that's where I always say, let's start with the KPIs and understand the business goals and go from there. It just like you would in everything. So the predictability is unfortunately just not a thing in any way. So anyway, like, just like, you, even with like foot traffic and even with sampling, like there's always going to be unpredictability. Yeah. But that's where we really work with our clients.
Well, and I think I want to dig in to the KPIs, because one of the big issues that I have, right? Because again, I don't expect there to be predictability. That's like someone holding me 100% accountable for a financial forecast.
Right.
We can't, right? Like it's our best prediction, our best estimate of what efforts will result in, right?
And that's why it's business.
Yeah.
Right?
But I think a lot of founders, I've seen many founders work with agencies who don't report KPIs. There's like a lack of reporting and there's a lack of information. And I think that part of it is that founders don't know what to ask for or don't have an expectation of like, what are the KPIs that someone should be reporting to me if I'm working with them?
Yeah. Well, I think this would probably be a good time for me to go back and share who our kind of clients are and then talk about that, because there's multiple ways to go about this. And I think if we're talking to your audience, which are typically like entrepreneurs, owner operators, founders, it's a very different story in media than it is if we're talking to a large multinational that has a marketing department and they have their own set of requirements. So it's very different. So I'm the founder and CEO of Noble West. We are an agriculture and food ingredient marketing agency. And I always say we're ag first, and we believe that agriculture is food marketing. And that's unlike some of our competitors who are like only in the ag silo or only in the food branding silo. I think we straddle both, and it really ladders up to our values and our mission of an agency, which is to help consumers understand more about where their food comes from so they can identify the value, and help farmers understand more about consumer preferences so they understand what to crop rotate, like, and really have that. So our clients typically, not every case, but I would say probably like 65-70% of the time, they are farmers first, and they own processing rice mills, and they're part of a rice co-op or a cherry packing company or an almond company or whatnot. And then they've come to us to say, okay, you're helping us with our grower marketing. You're helping us with our kind of overall ingredient marketing. A typical goal for like a bigger processor would be, if we can just, 5 to 10% of our revenue comes from our own CPG, our own house brand, we are so far ahead of the curve. That means millions that they're not paying in brokering fees. And they typically have the space and the packaging equipment to be able to run their own, because a lot of times they're running private label. So if they were able just to kind of slot in their own brand, then in their own packaging, and then keep that, it's sort of like they're not losing money off the top. Now that's when they have to invest in marketing. And I think that Noble West has just sort of straddles this. How I really staff the team is we are bringing outsiders in to help tell an old story. So outsiders, meaning most of the people that work in Noble West are not actually living in farming communities, unlike myself. Like, I am living in a farming community, but most of the team is in LA or Sacramento or Las Vegas or Columbus, Ohio. And so we are really looking to kind of tell that different story. And I think that that's where our clients kind of value that we have to slow down in order to find their authentic story without any assumptions.
Yeah.
And then once we do, how do we package that up, market it, and help them get a bigger return on investment, either through their retail programs or, in the case that we're talking about, their own B2C brand that they need to market.
Yeah. So many things that I want to dig into in what you just said. Like, so one of the things you said was identify, and I'm not saying this verbatim, but like identifying their story as sort of sounds like a step one. And I think that's, I've got a good friend in the industry, Katie Melezova, who helps a lot of the brands that I work with to do that, because what we find, as a CFO, if we're trying to help create a strategy, financial strategy, a growth strategy, so that we know where to spend our marketing dollars, for example, if we don't truly understand like who that brand is, who that brand's customer is, and where they shop, like we really can't make decisions, because it's sort of just saying like, yes, we can rely on, this channel has the best margin for growth, or this channel, the best opportunity, but we still have to answer that question of like, is our customer there? And that is not my area of expertise. So I always talk about going back to that very important initial step, kind of like foundational step, before you can make some of the financial decisions. And it seems like also make strategic decisions for marketing.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, I just feel like I am been blessed with this opportunity and platform to talk about this. What you're talking about is understanding consumer insights. Consumer insights quantitatively and qualitatively, qual and quant. I'm going to tell you 9 times out of 10, if a client is looking for ways to cut their marketing budget, and they're not really marketing, this is more branding budget.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that goes. And every time I'm like, oh God, please don't do that. Like, do not, let's skip on some of the social media posts or something. Like, understand your target. And I'm going to tell you an industry that really understands their target that I think the food industry can take some nods from. And that is the fashion industry.
Okay.
And a lot has been spoken. I listened to a masterclass a couple of years ago on Anna Wintour, and really she was sort of listing some of the brands and designers who understood their target. They understood the woman that they are addressing, more than that woman even knows. Like, they know what their decision will be before they do, right?
Right.
And I feel like that's a place where just understanding that, and I mean, you should be able to talk about your consumer like they are your friend, or they are somebody that you hang out with. But the hardest thing for founders and the hardest thing for owner operators is understanding that in many cases, their target consumer is not them. And then that is really hard. That's the hardest thing.
Yeah, I get that.
What is it? It's 90% of all household purchasing decisions are made by women. And I'm looking at some of the men that are in the room with us, which is all men in my woman owned and operated team.
Yeah.
And I just am like, how many of you have actually gone to the grocery store for more than 2 items in the last 5 years? And they honestly cannot answer. Or how many of you have gone to Walmart pickup? How many of you have had Instacart delivered? Do you order through Instacart? How many of you have done Costco delivery? Because I'm going to tell you, that's where we should be. And if you understood your consumer, because you're not actually shopping, so you actually are trying to tell me that those weekly paper publications in the grocery stores are still important. My friends and I are not reading those. We don't have time for that. We know where we are, and we are buying the brands who are with us in that space, which is busy working moms. But again, those are consumer insights.
Yeah.
And occasionally you are the target audience, right? Occasionally, you built the brand because it didn't already exist. But if you think that you're going to make a better granola, or if you're going to make a better bar, or if you're going to make a better kombucha, or if you're going to make a better tea, guess what?
I think too, you're automatically sort of more educated about your product than anyone who's going to buy your product. And I think that alone sort of, skews your point of view, right? And you're so hyper aware of your segment and stuff. I mean, I'm just thinking about myself, right? When I first started, it was well, I thought I was talking to people who understood numbers and just needed
Right.
tools to help them like organize it. And someone had to say to me, like, you need to simplify what you're saying, because you're talking in financial language, and like the people you're talking to that actually need your help, they're not. You would have to, stepping stone them to that.
Right.
So I think that makes
But I
a
think
lot of sense.
like the hardest thing, I mean, I think I've experienced this myself, is the hardest thing is like typically why you start a business is not why you're successful.
Tell me more about that.
Like if you want to start, there's exceptions all over the place, so I should probably caveat with that. But like why you decide that I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go out on my own and I'm going to make my side hustle my real hustle and I'm going to mortgage my house and all of the things, like that passion is what gets you off the ground.
Yeah.
Should you still be making all the business decisions like 3 years in when you're trying to scale it, or if you're trying to refinance it or whatever you're trying to do? Probably not, because you've got like some pretty crazy blinders on.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that's why this podcast is so important. That's why continuing education is so important. And I think that's why I think it's fine to have a healthy dose of skepticism towards consultants. But in some ways, you also need to realize like what you don't know, you don't know. And that's a place where I think as a marketing consultant and I hate the word agency, honestly, and honestly, the amount of time that we have spent trying to find a word that doesn't say agency, like consultancy or whatever, we are experts.
Yeah.
I just wish that we could help more brands spend less money on junk and bad marketing.
Yeah.
But the consumer insights are really a place where there's so much data out there. And I was just at Expo West and, talking to Spins and talking, all of the different like data out there. It is not to be cast off as not important, even if you have like a shoestring budget.
Yeah, I agree. I want to talk about what you were saying about not really liking the word agency or consultancy, because you want to be educating and be a partner, because something that you said in our initial conversation was that there's a difference between like a partner and vendor relationship. Yeah. And I want to go here next, because I think, so I want to say that I'm coming into this conversation with maybe 8 to 10 experiences with brands where they've gone poorly in terms of like the investment that they've made in marketing and online ads and things like that. So, and one of the things that I saw is like, it's been kind of transactional, or that, the I'll call them an agency, I'm sorry for lack of a better word, but they'll create a piece of content, or they'll kind of come back with something and they've really missed the mark, and it's like, oh, did they not hear? Do they not understand? Or is it that the brand doesn't have a clear idea of who they are and what their brand identity is? But I think that this approach that you're going to share about partnership versus vendor relationship is going to be key to a lot of folks who are thinking about maybe going back to finding an agency to work with or approaching one for the first time.
Yeah, this is a hot topic for us. And the truth is, it typically, after I do my kind of new business intake, get to know them, understand, I can pretty much tell by like our third conversation if we are set up for an unbelievable partnership, right? And if it's just a matter of making the dollars and cents work and working within the budget, and that I can tell if that, like, you can just tell that goodwill's there. Like, oh my gosh, I want to work together. And sometimes it's like, I want to work together, but I just can't do it this year.
Yeah.
But can we keep in touch or something? Those are different stories.
Yeah.
But when typically that second or third conversation, it starts getting transactional. What are you going to do for me? And like, really, it's when the scope of work starts getting beat up in a way that's like, you know what, actually, I'm not setting you up for success or my team for success. It's clear that you are just looking for executional deliverables. At this time, I would suggest you work with a freelancer who maybe will not bring like the broad creative concept, probably and there's amazing freelancers out there. I was a freelancer for 8 years and loved it. But like, that's a place where you should go work with a freelancer and really just focus on production. Because right now that's what you value. And maybe you've got some unbelievable distribution opportunity and you really don't need to spend money on people understanding your brand. And maybe you don't need product marketing because your distributor is going to do that. I don't know, maybe. But if you're not willing to like actually spend the time to understand what partnership could look like, the client is probably going to feel like they're paying too much. And the agency is probably going to feel like, gosh, they don't really care and they're not listening. And like, it's a little soul crushing, quite frankly.
Yeah.
That's also where you need to have a great scope of work that's very clearly outlined what the dependencies are, what the timeline is, what the scope is, what the deliverables are. And you also need to true that up every couple months. I know that we do a quarterly contract analysis. We want you to know how many hours we spent, how we're burning. And that's also the opportunity for you, client, to say, you know what, I know that I want to launch, it's March right now. I know that this summer I want to do a summer push for this. Mm-hmm. So I think that, what do you think about that? And then we'll say, okay, great. Let's just sort of like green light. Let's just sort of keep this going, keep the lights on. And then let's do a push in June or whatever. And so that way but that's partnership. That's us saying, you know what, actually we're willing to sacrifice our billing for the next 2 months because we see you, we hear you. And let's just keep the lights on, base minimum. Let's just package up a little bit of content. Let's pre-schedule it. You manage it. And then we're going to, in the meantime, going to be getting this campaign ready to kick off. And then you can say like, okay, you want to launch this. Do you want to do this big summer push? Okay. Are there certain markets you want to do that? Is there a certain target demographic? Tell us about the new product. Why is it different? But that's where partnership really comes in. When you come to the conversation with the challenge, not the solution, is typically a pretty good idea. And if you're coming with the solution, that's basically like, hey, I want 10 of this and 5 of this and 4 of this and call me good. And that's more of an executional, that's a vendor relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. From the brand's perspective, what would be some things that they should look for that maybe would be like a red flag of like this vendor is more of a vendor than a partner, right? Like I'm talking to a vendor right now instead of someone who can partner with me. Can you give us a couple, maybe
Absolutely.
3 things?
If they dive into the work too fast.
Okay.
If they actually do what you say at the client, meaning like, give it to me now.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like they jump too fast. So the reason why is because, like I always say, do we want happy clients or do we want satisfied clients who we've helped incrementally increase their business? Sometimes those overlap and that's the same. Most of the time it's not.
Yeah.
And that's where when you work with like a strategic partner or an agency or a consultancy who really cares, they're going to say, we know you want the sugar now, but like you have to have your dinner first and then you get to have it. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm full of analogies, but that's where if they are not asking the right questions, if there's not a proper discovery period, if they don't actually come fully embracing, if they haven't given you time to do the research, because I don't know about you, but the last thing I want is somebody shotgunning me ideas without actually knowing any context and coming full of assumptions.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that's the case, that is fully a vendor.
Yeah.
Places where I think you can do fine with vendors though, like trade show booths, like I think that's probably a good place. A couple handouts, like materials, I think is good. I think if you have a really good brand guideline and you want to trial like a new product or a different look and feel or something, I think you can probably go like trial that out with some freelancers. I think those are good ones. But that means that when you're doing that as the business owner, you have real clarity of thought. You are participating in the brief. It's very clear what that is. So like in some cases, I've had those calls when somebody said, hey, I need you to do this. And I'll say, great, but what about this, this, and this? And they're like, no, we just need this. And I say, I don't think we're going to be a great fit.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here's who maybe could help you. And when you're ready to do that big rebrand because like so-and-so's leaving the business, can you call me in a year? And that's how that goes.
Yeah. Transparency. I'm going to say that word for our listeners, something we talk about all the time. It's like being open and honest about what you want, what your needs are, what you can afford, all of those things. Right. And then I think like in that phase, that sort of like initial sort of
Mm-hmm.
partnership phase, if you will, right? It's you need to feel comfortable doing that as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you'll find a good partner, I
You know,
think.
one thing that we say internally is like, that saying, like, there's no stupid questions. Like, actually, there are stupid questions. And though that's in the form of, if you've gone through discovery and you've taken notes and you've been briefed in and you have studied it and you have listened and you have heard your client and you have experienced it, and then you come back with a question that you should know, that's a stupid question. That bugs me. And I also think that if you work in that vendor relationship in that transactional manner, you're just setting yourself up for more and more and more of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I want to talk about fee structure now, because this is a really interesting discovery on my part. Most of the interactions that I've had with, whether it's, you know, a marketing agency, like in terms of like the branding, or an online ads kind of support consultant, they have all had flat fees.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's like a dual fee, especially if there's like advertising happening, where it's like, okay, this is our agency fee to sort of like create the content for you. And then this is the ad spend fee. And you're just, you know, you're going to pay that every month.
Mm-hmm.
And I recently discovered that that's not how all agencies work. And so can you share with us the alternative ways of like structuring fees from an agency's perspective, and sort of the pros and cons of each of those?
Mm-hmm. Well, in most cases, I know for us, the majority of our work is done in a retainer basis. And that is for a couple reasons. But I would say that's where we do agree on a fee. We have an estimate. We explain how many hours we're going to take, where we're going to focus. And again, back to like the whole purpose of this whole podcast, we understand what your KPIs are.
Yeah.
And then we're actually checking along the way if we're aligning with your business goals, right?
Yeah.
And KPIs, I guess, maybe we should talk about that after, like, because I think there's more to talk about on that.
Yeah. Oh, there definitely is.
It's not just profitability, net margin. I mean, it's not just all that.
Yep.
But with fee structure, so I know we do project-based work, which I think maybe you consider flat fee. We do retainer work, and then on occasion we'll do hourly work.
Mm-hmm.
There's different ways also to look at that. There is more, like if I'm working with a startup and they really want to work with us, and it's going to be a great partnership, and we are totally mission and vision and values aligned, and we have the time for it, honestly, if we have the capacity available. I've also worked in a place where equity plus fee, and for a less fee. I've done that several times. That can be a really rewarding way to work with some of our clients. But then as far as paid media, how Noble West currently runs paid media is that we've created something called hybrid, and that is HIBRD, where we're really looking to marry owned, earned, and paid. Okay. And those are the kind of the tenets, the peso model really of marketing. And that's where we actually charge you part of our managed fee. And this is in most all of our scopes of work, honestly, is Marcom's planning. And that's where we do planning against all of those. And that is part of your fee. Now, if you decide to take the recommendation that we've given you, then we will manage your paid media, and then we will take a commission. And taking a commission that's kind of a very commonplace. Typically, it's anywhere from 10 to 15% for the first 100,000, and it gets more economical the more you buy. But that percentage is really utilized for optimizing the ads, for daily check-ins, checking the campaigns, looking at results, pivoting. It's kind of like what a day trader does, but for paid advertising. And that's where I say to a lot of owner operators and smaller businesses, like, it is so, like, I would never do that for myself. And I am in the industry. I'm just not that kind of specialist, right? And that's where I say, like, oh my God, it'd be so risky if you're managing your money like that. Like, a boosted post here or there on Meta's, like, okay, no big deal. Like, I could even handle that myself, or on LinkedIn, no big deal. But if you literally are looking to actually get a return on investment, and if you are actually looking to like drive lead gen and online sales or adoption or to the stores or whatever, that's where I just think that you are absolutely crazy to be doing that on your own, and also risky, you know, because I mean, we're equipped for it. And as an agency, that's a specialty. And I think we talked about this earlier also, is if you don't have $50,000 to spend in paid advertising, in most cases, I would absolutely just keep the money in your bank account.
Yeah, this fascinated me because
Okay.
you were the first person that I've ever heard say that, right? Like going back to some examples with the founders we've worked with, like paid ads at $5,000 a month over, 6 months. Okay, I guess that's $30,000. I mean, is that what you're talking about here? Or like, can you sort of structure it? What is the time frame you're talking about? Is this like an all-in investment?
So I would say that in most cases, unless it's sort of like an always-on strategy, which is I think, works in some cases, if you are going to go as a consumer packaged good, now again, we're not talking about a service business. We're not talking about like this is really consumer packaged good.
Yeah.
If you had $30,000 and I think your example was over 6 months, over 6 months, I would probably venture to guess that our media planner would say, you know what, let's do a 6-week sprint of $30,000 in one market on one channel with one campaign. And let's have more intensity and impactfulness around that campaign.
Okay. I
probably venture to guess.
Right.
But here's the thing. If you're an owner operator or a small business or a founder, you're like, geez, Louise, that's really risky. Man, I don't know. But like, I don't know if it's summertime and you're launching a new popsicle and you have great distribution in South Texas or whatever, and you're going to be like, okay, we're going to do dedicated campaign in McAllen and Brownsville and with HEB. And that's the campaign. That's actually not that risky.
Well, and so okay. You're like opening my mind here a little bit because one of the things you said was always on, which I think there's an assumption that is just how it is. Like you turn on online ads and they're literally always on. And so if you have a budget of $3,000 a month, that's like what you do. It's what you do. And then you get a certain level of return. And then maybe you increase that, a monthly budget. But I think most people think, I could be wrong, but I think most people think always on is like the way to go or like the way that it's done versus what you just laid out, which makes perfect sense to me. And by the way, also goes back to knowing your audience.
Yeah. And your distribution. Yesterday I was on a call with a creative director for a fantastic agTech company. And she was like, we're talking about where they wanted to run media because one of the deliverables is that we're going to develop a campaign and run the media. And I said, great, where are your top salespeople? And she's like, why do you care? And I was like, because if I want to know where your top salespeople are, because honestly, if you've only got like a finite amount of money, like they're a startup, they don't have gobs of advertising money. I said, I want to run campaigns where I think you're going to get the highest conversion. So why don't you go talk to the VP of sales and find out where the stars are and let's start there. And she's like, oh my gosh. She's like, oh, I've never heard that before. And I was like, great, because, and can I just have like the top 2 or 3? Because like, if we're going to do this in the Yakima Valley in Washington, Nogales, Arizona, and the, Las Cruces, New Mexico or whatever, like that's where the campaign should run.
Right.
And and let's make an actual proper impact. And then once you get some data and once you get some real traction there, then we are going to be able to, number 1, prove that advertising works. Number 2, get conversion and get more budget.
Yeah. Okay. I have another question because I'm channeling the founder here. And I feel like some of them are saying, well, I want to, they're saying, well, I want to drive traffic to on my e-commerce, my site, my website. So shouldn't I always be on for that? Isn't that like an all the time kind of a thing?
That is not wrong, but it just depends how much money you're talking about and how many channels you're on. So if you're a founder and say, like, I don't know, Sarah, I should ask you this question. What's an average advertising budget for your clients?
It varies because my clients are some are funded and some are like not at all. So some have a zero online ad budget and some have, we're talking, there's a budget circling around one of my clients of $150,000 annual.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's for actual advertising budget.
Yeah.
Do they have somebody else? And then, but that doesn't count like writing the ads and content.
Correct.
And
No, that's the
that's
ad budget.
media,
Yeah.
paid media budget.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you have $150,000 in your paid media, which is not, it's not a ton, but it's not nothing, obviously, and money matters.
Yeah.
That I would say, we would probably say you need to be looking at one channel, and you could be looking at in 3 markets.
Okay.
The eye rolls I can feel like of my team when they actually listen to this, if they do. And that is aggressive.
Okay. So when you're saying channel, I mean,
Google search.
Okay. So that's the channel. So we're directing them to mycpgbusiness.com, right? Is where we were driving them to. And you're saying the channel is the
Instagram.
Okay. Gotcha. And then you said 3 locations?
Like probably 3 markets. And have not one of those markets be like LA and New York.
Right.
Or if it's going to be LA, like do like South Bay or like, the Hills or something like, and that's why I say like an actual agency can be so helpful. How on earth would you know this if you weren't working with somebody who does this all the time?
Yeah. And I'm in my financial brain is going also like, we don't want to ship from, let's say, LA to New York, right? Let's not target across the country. What strategically makes sense for us logistically at this point in the
Absolutely. Because I know like with shipping, as soon as you go like past like the Mississippi River or something, like it's a whole different, like you get into a whole different shipping category.
Yeah.
We have a client who we can't even make money if it goes over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's understanding, first things like zip codes. Like what zip codes are we targeting? But Sarah, that goes back to your target audience.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So what I'm learning here today is, and I want to talk about the KPIs too, but it's sort of like, I think you know your audience is number 1, know your budget, and then find the right partner, someone who feels like a partner to you and will treat you, like a partner.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's a level of communication and transparency that can only happen with a partner versus a vendor, right? And then it seems like know what outcomes you are striving for. It seems like the outcomes are also driving this. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit for us? Let me know if I'm off track or if that does make sense.
I think you're right on track. Are we trying to foot traffic? Are we trying to grow our likes? Are we trying to grow our list? Are we trying to grow our email database list? Those are all good questions. Or if you are selling online, like they buy more than one thing, or like working with the tech company to like working with whomever is managing online sales, like is the messaging right? Like, are we driving people? Number 1, that's like probably the advertising. And then also like the marketer in me is like, well, if we have like abandoned carts, like what is the messaging? What's that experience once they get there? Right. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's to make an appointment. Like it really just really depends.
Yeah.
Kind of what you're looking to accomplish. But that's where having that conversation and real partnership about that, and also being realistic. That's why I say like we came up with that $50,000 after a couple failed campaigns, to be honest, where we were working with really awesome people who did really awesome things, and we're awesome people and we want to be helpful. And so we said yes to them.
Yeah.
We said yes to like a couple $25,000 campaigns that we're going to run over 3 or 4 months. And their results were just so like straggly, like they were working, but not enough to like, there was not enough ROI to be frank. Right. And that is where just like, it was sort of like, everyone's like, Ali, I know you want to help these businesses so much, but I don't think it's helping them. Right. And that's when we really had to draw a line in the sand.
Right. So interesting. I think a lot of founders have in their mind, like the goal is increased sales.
Right.
And I think you hit on a good point where it's like when you're working with an expert, they're going to look at your whole system. Mm-hmm. And as you were starting to say, they're going to say, okay, we're not going to drive traffic to your website because your conversion rates are too low, right? Yeah. Or not at an optimal level. Yeah. I was on a call with 2 guys. We ended up not working with them just because the timing isn't right. And they identified that there's work to do on the brand side before any execution makes sense. And what they were saying is like, you've got a mailing list and you're not capitalizing on it. And those folks they're converting when you when you send the email, right? They're like, don't spend any money on online ads right now. You haven't even taken advantage of that low hanging fruit yet. And I thought, okay, these guys are top notch, like respectable guys, because they easily could have taken this person's money, but instead they gave them sound advice to like focus on the foundations first. And I really appreciated that. And I think that, you know, founders maybe need to hear that there's some baseline stuff that needs to be taken care of and capitalized on right before you. And especially if you don't have that $50,000, as you're saying, it's like, what can you do to increase the outcomes that you're looking for?
Yeah. And the other thing I'm going to say is $50,000, any way you skin it, is not going to drive an e-com business unless you're striking lightning with something else. I think we talked about that before. Like there could be something that goes viral and holy cow, it just becomes a thing, right? Like, and there are those it moments and it does happen and it's amazing. Like, I think Vuori clothing is one of those things. I think bitchin' sauce is one of those things. You know, I think there are those like lightning strike moments, and that's awesome. Something went viral, some piece of content hit, enough people got behind it. I don't know, something happened. They might have gotten a couple PR posts, like something happened, and that's amazing. But to build a business off selling things off your own in like a website is going to be a long, hard business. Like, I mean, I don't know how many websites that are food oriented that you go to just to buy that one thing.
Yeah.
But it's probably not too many anymore. Like 5-10 years ago, you did. I mean, I remember like logging in like chomps.com to like have them like sent to me, or nutpods.com, like I remember that. But that's not really consumer behavior right now. They're going to Thrives, they're going to Amazon's, they're doing Instacart, they're utilizing like all sorts of different technologies for that search. And also I think we got to give like the retailers like a little bit of credit. Most of the grocery stores and most of the retail chains have really stepped up their online presence. And so if you're going to try to compete with that against their like millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising, it's going to be a long road to hoe. So I would, number one, caution somebody that like they need a website for due diligence to help with retail sales, to help with, again, just even consumer due diligence, not just retail buyers.
Yeah.
But it's going to be really long. I would definitely think of a different strategy.
And I think omni-channel, right? Like, yeah, like you're saying, and I want to be clear to the people listening too, when we're talking about not doing that solely, it doesn't mean, oh, I have to go into big grocery. That's not what it means. No. There are so many different channels. There are so many different ways to build a financially successful food business. So don't think it's like a one or the other type of thing. But I agree with you to put all, and as you're saying, like there's a big financial investment in that ad spend, right? To really get people going. Something else you said on the initial call we had when we were.
Let me just say something else.
Yeah.
Right, let me just say something else.
Yeah.
What most of our clients are doing, and this is where I do think the founders need to hear. What most of our clients are probably, I don't know, 80% of their product goes into private label.
Okay.
That's where we work with hero food ingredients. And so like that's how they make all their money to fund basically their CPG brand for the long haul, through the ups and the downs and the bad economy, the good economy, all of it. That's sort of like their baseline. So for a startup food brand, that's where I think like find partnerships so that you can make your offering better. If you're using a co-packer, how can you market it together? How can you save on shipping? Like what is your angle? Yeah. And what is that brand narrative? And what do you know consumers need? If you create a brand because like for your lifestyle, you needed it and it just didn't exist and you're like, I'm going to make it. And that's awesome. But just know that there might not be 100 million people out there that have the same issue, right?
Yeah. Let's go back to the KPIs, right? So I think we successfully talked through the different goals that you can have as far as like the final outcome, right? You said increase traffic, increase likes, growing your list, growing your average cart value. So knowing that there are many things that you could be working toward, right? Choosing one and working toward it. Can you talk about KPIs, maybe even just from a sort of a strategic level, like what are they? We're not going to assume that everybody knows what the acronym KPI stands for. And then maybe how do you go about setting them with your partner?
So KPI is a key performance indicator. And I would say I'll just sort of rattle off some of the things that our clients look for. Again, I don't think this is an all or nothing kind of conversation.
Yeah.
KPIs, able to grow their retail presence, open more doors.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to break into new markets, new territories or regions. Their sales team was able to cut down their sales cycle because due diligence happened faster. They were able to run more retail partnerships with grocery stores or whatnot through either social media or couponing or whatnot. They were able to increase the number of partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, grow sales by product, by SKU, by brand. They were able to grow website traffic. Their analytics improved. They were able to do co-branded partnerships because their brand was strong and their marketing was strong. So you just sort of start flocking together.
Yeah.
Then I think there's just baseline like good practices of analytics, which is, looking at like impressions and click-through rate and adoption, all that. So
yeah,
but those are just a couple.
Yeah. I think with KPIs, tell me what you think about this, is like measurable, obviously.
Absolutely. Numbers.
And wanting to see progress toward the outcome that we're seeking, right? So from the financial seat, I am well aware that like there's no certain outcomes, right? And we can't predict, okay, if you spend this much money, you're going to get this much in return.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Sarah. I feel like my job is done here. I've accomplished the whole purpose of me being on this podcast.
Yeah. And it's not always that we're trying to grow revenue with whatever sort of campaign we're running, right? So I think number one is like, from my seat, is like get clear on what we're trying to accomplish, number one. And then number two is like, if I'm managing spend and I'm responsible for helping founders see return on investment and strategically spend and invest their money, which is part of my job.
Yes.
I feel like I need some measurement on a regular basis, once a month, every other week, whatever makes sense for you. Is like a minimum is once a month, but like show me something that and maybe this comes with partnership that I just haven't seen in the past, is like, here are the numbers, here is what working, here's what's working, here's what's not, here's what we're going to do about it. I mean, is that an unrealistic expectation, or does that sort of?
No, I want to see a number with a graph with green and red. So that's what I'm talking about. Those KPIs are all measurable, and I want to see them in an analytic format.
Okay.
But I'm going to tell you what, in order to do that, we are a partner. I am not a vendor.
Yeah.
Because you're sharing either sales data with me or percentages of growth, whatever you grow with, but you are giving me information that is probably a little vulnerable to share.
But how would you do your job if that information wasn't shared with you?
Well, you wouldn't. You would just be feeling like that you wouldn't be. You would be doing your scope of work. And that's not to say you wouldn't be doing your job. You would be executing on the scope of work. You'd be executing on the brief to the best of your ability. Yeah. Now, how that is measured would leave a lot of gray and like room to be desired. Yeah. But if it's not measured in the way I said earlier, you're probably not going to see the value in the partnership. And then you're probably going to have a hard time going and justifying to your CFO what you got out of it.
Yeah. There are instances where I see nothing. I see no data. And it's like, why are we still spending money here? I see no data and I see no increase in revenue. And it's either because we're not getting it from the agency or we're not tracking things internally. Right. Yeah. And maybe the founder doesn't know, like, and I think to be fair, I like to be a part of things that like people probably don't think I need to be a part of. Like as the CFO, I'm like, I want to be in your marketing strategy meeting. I have nothing to say. I just want to absorb the information so I know what we're working toward and like what the goals are. And so I know why we're spending money on things. Like I have no expertise in marketing at all. Like, and I'm not even going to pretend that I do. You know what I mean? But but it's helpful for me to know what we're working toward. And then I can be an advocate for a founder if the outcomes are not, like, if we're not getting measurements, if we're not getting KPI reports and things like that, you know what I mean? That's where I can kind of be the quote unquote bad guy sometimes, to be like, hey, can we get some data? You know?
Well, I think also, but that's utilizing your team well, right? Like if you're probably coming in without being saddled with all the information, you can be more objective and ask more questions that are truly questions because you're curious. And that's a way to honestly keep everybody on their toes. And that is a place where there is no dumb question.
Right. Yeah. I love that.
I think you should keep going to those meetings. I think you should keep asking those questions, because the truth is, if you do that, you might be helping the marketing team understand what business objectives have to be met, because it's very easy to get into like the trap of just continuing to do what you do with a lot of assumptions. And, you know, like we always say, like what gets measured gets done.
Yep.
And that's where we want to be that partner. But that is true partnership.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to say too, for folks who are listening, like, I don't think you can run a business without being vulnerable and having to coming up against at least one time, right? A feeling of like, oh God, I'm nervous to share this in your career, right? Like that has happened with me. I remember like, you know, trying to get someone to help me with my website a while back. It was like, I don't know how to talk to this person. I'm not sure. I didn't have clarity on my brand, right? But I had to work through it. Every single time someone comes to me in my consulting business and they're literally opening their books to me, like it's the most vulnerable, I think. You know, it's not sales numbers, it's debt numbers, it's profit or loss, it's cash flow or lack thereof. And I know that it's hard. And I guess I'm just wanting to like pep talk people and be like, when you do that hard thing, that's how you can get good help and how you can change, you know, the outcomes in your business. And if you do find the right partners, you've, you know, spoken so much about today, it's like, it should feel okay. It should feel like a safe place to be able to share that.
Yeah. I never want somebody to feel like they're taking a flyer on me. You know, like, we'll just give it a shot. I never want anybody to feel like that. I want them to feel like, okay, I'm hiring a company that I believe in their mission too. I believe in their leadership also. And I'm going to give this a try. And with very clear expectations of what I want and how I'm going to hold them accountable and how I'm going to hold myself accountable. Because I mean, Sarah, you're in the same situation. Like your work is only as great as like, what is that term? Like garbage in, garbage out. Like you have to like your own work is only as good as what you're putting in. And also if people are showing up to their meetings, if they're bringing them best selves, and it's like goalposts changing, like with their goals. Right. And that's where we need to have that dialogue. And that's where I hope that like the folks listening who are on the fence about whether to work with an agency or not, or to sub out some of their work, I think just ask questions. And it's better if it starts off slow, honestly. It's like, you don't need to rush into this. And I try not to rush into it, because the times I have rushed into partnerships it's been too easy to close a deal. Honestly, those typically aren't the best. They're not the best, like long-term working relationships. And now, I mean, the majority of our clients have been with us for years. And I think it's because like we're following the ebbs and flows of their industry and care about them.
Yeah. Yeah. And you and I are not unique in our ability or willingness or desire to be that for our partners. And I say that because whether you work with me as your financial consultant or you're the type of business that Noble West works with, it's like, you don't have to choose us. There are others out there who have the same philosophies and who will meet you and be your partner, whether it's in finance or in marketing. We're like so tight on time. We have like, I'm going to say 2 minutes, but I want you to say the thing you told me about boosted ads, because I think as a small brand who maybe doesn't have a big budget, your boosted post tip might be helpful for them.
So if a startup or if a brand does not have a huge budget and they don't have the 50 grand kind of threshold that we're recommending, there is definitely a place that you can safely boost your own posts. And the trick there is having really great content. So if you boost garbage, it's not going to work. Right. But if you boost like a really cute post or a great reel or something that really tells your story and is catchy and fun, I think then boosting is fine. But before you do it, why are you doing it? What are you hoping to get out of it? And really kind of keeping track of, how are you measuring that?
Yeah.
But I think that there's definitely a time and place to manage boosted posts. And then I would just again, kind of keep an eye on the timing of how long is it running? And then query your Google Analytics by that amount of time to really check, especially if it's more of an impulse buy, which is obviously more food is, that I think you can really check that out. But your content has to be great.
Yeah. And should it have some level of traction and be like, oh, people are responding to this. This is getting some comments, whatever it is, and then you choose to boost?
Well, whatever your call to action is.
Gotcha.
So if it is to click through for whatever, if it's a sale, if it's whatnot, there just has to be a very strong call to action, and it has to be really stinking cute. That is not just going to go, it has to be catchy and clever. So, bring out the puppy dogs and whatnot.
I love it. Well, Ali, thank you so much. I am leaving this conversation with a better understanding of how we can evaluate and partner with agencies and vendors in a way that we can not ensure a return on investment, but feel better about the investment that we're making, which is a win for me. So I want to thank you for joining me today and talking through all of this with me.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Ali, where can folks find you and learn more about Noble West?
Sure. We are on the internet at wearenoblewest.com. We're also on socials at We Are Noble West. And then I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. So Ali Cox, ALICOX. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ali. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye.
Looking for more content like this? Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll see weekly podcast episodes as well as other content related to the show. Just visit youtube.com/@thegoodfoodcfo.
Thank you for joining us here today. If you enjoyed this episode or found it helpful or inspiring in any way, please share it with your founder friends on social and rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It's the #1 way to help good food founders find the show. We'll be back with a brand new episode next week.